Virtual CPD Masterclass, or what we call webinar. And from the South African Pharmacy Council, of course, I've got my colleagues with me as well. So we are now live. Okay. So just as an opening and welcome, these are powerful words by Albert Einstein. Most of us, we know Einstein, and he says intellectual growth should commence at birth and cease at death. So meaning we really need to keep on growing. There's no time to say you've learned enough. Every day we learn new things, and the time that you say you're no longer learning anything should be when you are dead. And that is why somebody will say the poorest place should be the graveyard and the graves, and not people that are still alive. B.B. King says the beautiful thing about learning is that nobody can take it away from you. So whatever that you have learned, experiential, practical at your workplace, nobody can ever take that away from you, because that is your wealth. Your knowledge is your wealth, and your knowledge is power as well. So just as an outline of our presentation, we're looking, we've done opening and welcome, and I've welcomed everybody, of course, who has joined us virtually from all the sectors of pharmacy, my colleagues as well, that have made time to come and listen to this webinar. Really, you're all welcome, and maybe you're enjoying your cup of tea wherever you are listening in, just so that we comply with the CPD requirements. So we are looking at the CPD requirements, the annual declaration, the designation of persons, that is our outline, CPD essentials, that is competency standards, domain and competencies, but some of them are more into intense CPDs, so we may omit some of them, which are now on the outline, but on the actual slides, we've actually removed them. We're looking at domains and competencies, and the frequently asked questions and facts, and how to learn what constitutes a good CPD activity. We do have a document that also talks to this as well. Learning activities and evidence. We're looking at compliance and archives and selection of compliance years, CPD submission deadlines, and the highlights. So that's just the outline. And when we look at the CPD requirements, we do note that by definition, the process by which registered persons maintain and enhance their competence throughout their professional careers. So that is what we look at when we say continue professional development. So you're keeping abreast with everything that you are learning in terms of your career, and it encompasses a lot of activities. That is continuing education and supplementary training. We do have colleagues that do embark on supplementary training courses, and also attend seminars and all that. So CPD enables registered person to develop in their area of practice and demonstrate competence. And that is why we are so passionate about continued professional development. And we do realize this is a global trend, and even the International Pharmaceutical Federation talks more on continued professional development and keeping abreast with latest trends and current trends. So CPD is a cyclical activity. When you look at compliance requirements, so you need to complete an annual declaration each year by 1st of February. So make sure as you pay, or rather when you update your membership with Pharmacy Council, that is annually you pay your annual fees, do make sure that you also complete your annual declaration. You record at least 6 CPD activities, and this is something that we know, and this is no manual submissions. Everything is done online. And you maintain an electronic portfolio of evidence. This is not to be uploaded. And we know that the regulations, CPD regulations state that at any time the registrar may ask you to provide your proof of evidence, evidence of the submitted CPD entries. So you keep that. Normally what I do as well, you will have your 2020 folder, 2021 folder, 2022 folder, and within that you will have CPD 1, 2, 3. And if it's an article that you read, you file it online on your desktop or in your computer, and such that when they request it, you are able to draw that and submit that. So pharmacists are encouraged to submit at least 1 entry every 2 months. So every 2 months, you submit 1 entry, and that will amount to a total of 6 CPD entries. So when we look at the annual declaration, It is made up of three components. That is your employment, looking at the scope of practice, your domain competencies, and those are 6 domains that we all know of, and the assessment criteria, which is a 4-step CPD cycle. Of course, we do have a 2-step as well that will omit the reflection and the planning. So when you look at all the steps, they constitute an annual declaration. You go through them until you finish your annual declaration, that thereby resulting in either practicing or non-practicing based on your selection. If you're selected that you don't do anything in terms of your public health or your research, you don't do anything in terms of the scope of practice of pharmacist, ultimately you will designate yourself, self-designate yourself as non-practicing. But if you say, I sometimes do this, I do it often, at the end you will be designated as practicing and you agree to it. So it's an auto-designation to practicing, and this is to be submitted, as we said from the previous slide, 1st of February each year. So in terms of the designation of persons, this is according to regulations 4, subsection 1 of regulations relating to continued professional development, that a person may choose to be designated as either practicing or non-practicing. And when we talk about practicing, the registered person is currently providing one or more of the services or performing one or more of the acts pertaining to their scope of practice. If you're a pharmacist, you're accessing one or more of the scope of practice of a pharmacist. And if you're non-practicing, you're currently not providing any of the services or performing any of the acts that are pertaining to the scope of practice of a pharmacist. So when we look at CPD essentials, you just take a few minutes to familiarize yourself with the competency framework. And we do have a CPD guidance document. We have uploaded that on the website as well. Just reflect and you go through, you remember about the CPD guidance documents. But what is important to remember, we talk about the domain. From the domain, move to the competency standards and the behavioral standard statement, which is more on the intent side as well, where you look at whether that particular domain competency standard has been accomplished, like 75% of the work has been covered for that competency standards. And we talk about the behavioral standards that covers the acts and services that you perform as a professional. So it's important to remember. Of course, we are not gonna talk more on the competency standard as well. We're going to skip the slide. This is more in terms of what intents also cover. But when we look at the domains, we've got about 6 domains that we're going to focus on. That is the public health and safe and rational use of medicines and medical devices. The supply of medicines and medical devices, that's the 3rd one. The 4th one, organization and management skills. The 4th one, professional and personal practice. The 5th one, and the 6th one is education, critical analysis and research. So it's 1, public health, 2, safe and rational use, 3, supply of medicines, 4th, organization, 5th, professional and personal practice, and the 6th one is education, critical analysis and research. So those are 6 domains. I thought I'm seeing some other numbers. So take note of how each competency standard is structured. From these domains, you get your competency standards, right? And we are also not going to cover that because that is more on the intent side. But what is also critical, that is asked not every time, is pharmacists who are not working in clinical care tend to ask, right? I only develop regulations. I'm a pharmacist, but not working directly with patients. I research drug interaction and drug use. I train pharmacists or PSP. So whether you are working directly or not directly with patients or not, but you are accessing one or more of the scope of practice of a pharmacist. Remember the domains, right? You may not necessarily be interacting with a patient on a day-to-day basis. You may be in the supply of medicines or medical devices. That is the scope, that you're accessing the scope of practice of pharmacist. So in a way, you are supposed to be designated as practicing. You cannot access any of this scope or part of the domains and then you designate yourself as non-practicing, unless you're a pharmacist, but you're a farmer and you're not accessing any of the scope of practice of pharmacists, then you will designate yourself as non-practicing. Or you are just an entrepreneur, or you are just into business and it's got nothing related to pharmacy, and you're not touching any of the scope that relates to a pharmacist, then you can designate yourself as non-practicing. But for as long as any of this particular domain or scope, you're you are accessing. Whether you're a lecturer, you're involved in research, you're involved in education, critical analysis, and research. So you need to designate yourself as practicing. So, you develop regulations that touches the scope of practice of pharmacists, because with those regulations, you are going to determine how pharmacy is supposed to, we're supposed to roll out or work or function in South Africa. So you are developing regulations that talks to how we're supposed to practice as pharmacists. You are accessing the scope. You may not be dealing directly with patients, but you're dealing with medicines that will be ingested by patients, will be taken by the public. You are accessing that particular scope. You are training pharmacists or PSPs. So these are facts. Pharmacy practice is not restricted to the provision of direct clinical care only, right? It includes working in a direct non-clinical relationship with clients, administration, education, research, advisory, regulatory, or policy development, and any other roles that impact on the safe, effective delivery of services in the profession. So this is very important as well. So your obligation is to choose CPD activities that are relevant to your scope of practice. For instance, if I'm in statutory facility, or I'm in a research facility, whatever CPD that I may need to choose from will be a CPD that's related to my line of work, but that will also enhance, or rather empower me as a person, so that I don't become, sorry to say, redundant, but I become the best in what I'm doing. So however, you are not precluded from choosing other types of CPD if this information is useful in your personal development. So you want to learn about chemo, but I'm not in a chemo setup, but I'm very fascinated. It's something that maybe I did in my community service, and I just want to enhance. This is something that I can still choose and say, no, let me learn more about chemotherapy, and how to mix it, and then what are the drugs that are used there. So how to learn? So you can learn in into different cycles. You can have a 4-step CPD cycle. That, of course, that relates to that's this particular slides as well. That relates to your reflection, your planning, evaluation, and implementation. Or you can have a 2-step CPD cycle that relates to your evaluation and implementation. You skip out the reflection and the planning. So this is how it's supposed to be structured. You can learn on those different steps. So, but what constitutes a good CPD activity? The learning title, you need to ensure that the title is appropriate and relevant to the domain. The learning need, what knowledge gaps do you seek to fill? The learning method, the activity, will this be measurable, non-measurable, or structured? The learning outcome, what have you learned and how did it improve your skills? So these roots, learning title, need, method, and outcome, this constitute a good CPD. So if you have this, this is like the foundation. Definitely you won't go wrong if you need to fulfill your CPD activity. So as we said, learning methods or activities vary. You can do a self-study, a case study. You can attend conferences. I know others will say we've got breakfast conversations or whatever related to a particular topic. Secondly, you can do a short course, you review an article, you invite a guest, and then you go through that particular article or write-up. Thirdly, you can do a diploma, postgraduate studies. It could be a supplementary training. It could be a master's that you're pursuing, your PhD. You're still learning, learning every day as you submit your protocol. So in terms of portfolio of evidence, we need evidence that is valid, relevant, that's current, but that's not uploaded on the system. So we are not uploading any evidence on the CPD platform. It is only pharmacist interns that upload their evidence, which are annotated, which are well structured, all that. But with pharmacists, you can just learn, whether it's a short course, and then you take that particular article, you sort of store it in your computer on your on a drive, a hard drive, or a computer where you can be able to access it when it is needed, right? So a CPD entry must relate to the learning during the current year. Hence, we've got submission for 2022, 2023, and you cannot have a 2021 sort of material that you're submitting in 2023. So the evidence needs to be current as well, and can be any documents acquired in the learning process, and do not upload it. So 2023, it's current. 2022, it's outdated, because that is something that happened last year, and it needs to be fresh and current as well. So in terms of compliance and archives and view, on the annual declaration, you're able to check your entries, how many you have submitted. If you can look at the green arrow, it will show you the year of compliance, or the year of the annual declaration, 2023, for example. And then when the CPD was created, also, when the annual declaration was completed, it will show you practicing and self-designated. You self-designated yourself as practicing. You were not auto-designated. And 6 CPDs are required, but thus far you have submitted 2. If you check on the entries, and you're able to, on the yellow arrow, you're able to see the number of entries that you've submitted. On the red arrow, you're able to view the entries that you've submitted, right? You're able to read through and check whatever you have submitted, from reflection, planning to implementation and evaluation. You're able to check that. So this is how the new MVC pages look like, from compliance, where you're able to see the CPDs that are submitted for compliance. Firstly, when you submit a CPD entry, when you go through your reflection, planning, implementation, and evaluation, you submit that for compliance, right? And then when you move on to the next year, right, 2024, all the CPDs that have been submitted for 2023 will be archived, so that you can submit fresh CPD entries for 2024. But for 2023, you will be considered compliant, because you have submitted a total of 6. So if you look at this pharmacist, the pharmacist has been compliant from 2020, submitting 6 CPD entries for compliance. 2021, the pharmacist submitted 7. 2022, the pharmacist submitted 6, right? And for 2023, assuming that we are now in the month of, because for every 2 months, you need to submit 1, right? So now let's assume we are now run about April, right? Yeah, we are in April, the 4th month. So already the pharmacist has submitted 2, and the pharmacist is still going on. And by now, the pharmacist should at least have submitted 6, right? So this is how it goes with all the years, and the pharmacist has been compliant throughout all the years. So if you need to, check or view your entries, you're able to click on that view that is on the red arrow, and you're able to check your entries that you've submitted from your entry number. So on the just below this red block, it will have an entry number where it will indicate to you CPD1 or CPD2, whether you've chosen domain 1, 3, 5, 6, but the number will be number 1 and number 2. It will just categorize them like that. So under domain 4, which is organization and management skills, you do have a domain competency. That's like a subsection of the domain. That's like a subheading of the things that you can address under organization and management skills. And that you're looking at quality assurance. That's domain competency 4.4. And under 4.4, the pharmacist chose to speak about risk registers and management. And the status is submitted for compliance. And that was submitted on the 25th of January, 2023, 21 minutes past 1 in the afternoon. So also, you can go through your CPDs and check what you've submitted under reflection, planning, implementation, and also evaluation. You can check all that. And the second CPD was submitted from domain 5, which is professional and personal practice. And under the domain competency, it's 5.2. So that's the title, and that's the status, and that's the first submission date. So this is what, when we move on to 2024, let's say 6 CPDs are submitted for 2023. We will say this pharmacist is compliant because the pharmacist has submitted a total of 6 CPD entries for 2023. and they will have moved to archive, and you're able to view them. If the pharmacist has not submitted any of the 6 CPD entries on that particular year of 2023, the pharmacist will now be considered non-compliant, because 2023 has passed and you're submitting 2023 entries in 2024. So also, it's very important to select the year of compliance. Very, 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 very important. Make sure that when you move to through this year, submit 2023 CPD entries in 2023. It will make a lot of things very much easier. So you are able to also do the 2-step cycle where you omit the reflection and planning. You move on to implementation and evaluation. Is because you realize that you are at an advanced knowledge, or rather an advanced step. You've already covered your reflection and plan. You don't need to plan. You don't need to reflect or plan for the CPD. You know what to implement and what to evaluate. So you put your measures in place and you move straight to implementation and evaluation. And it says it will ask you about the learning title and the duration and the achievement date. You write about that, and if the learning objectives have been met. And also, you're going to describe what you have learned. You describe that in full. And then you are able to choose the year of compliance, which is 2023. And then you submit for compliance. Of course, if you want to submit for peer review, you can do that. You select your peer, and the peer gets a notification, and the peer is able to accept and all that, and just to read through what you have submitted. But submitting for compliance as well also is very ideal, because you've clocked or registered your CPD. So in terms of the deadlines, the grace period ended on 30 April 2023. But if I have to update this, I would say that this was also extended to August It was extended to 24 August 2023, whereby now, if this period ends, the non-compliant pharmacists are now going to be designated as non-practising. And if that is an RP or a tutor, referral, we know, goes to professional conduct for disciplinary as well. So, but for 2023, like we said, for every 2 months you submit 1 CPD entry, and then the deadline is 31st December 2023. So I know as the office we were dealing with the extension, the grace period from April that went to August and for 2022. But when 2023 ends, just ensure and make sure that you've submitted all the required CPD entries. So what are the highlights, my colleagues, right? For now, right, in red, we don't assess for competence for now, right? But okay, we don't assess for competence, but we do assess for compliance. We don't even assess for compliance, but at a later stage we will do that. We'll assess for compliance, but we don't assess for competence. Is out there. Pharmacist interns are a cadre, or rather a group that we assess for competence. We're checking whether this particular CPD meets this competency, whether the behavioral standard has been covered in full, whether this has been annotated properly. So we assess for competence when we talk about pharmacist interns. But for qualified colleagues such as us, pharmacists, we don't assess for competence. We don't have CPD points, right? I know in our guidance document, in our CPD regulation, we don't talk about CPD points. CPD points is a language that's used globally elsewhere, and even by HPCSA and all other statutory bodies that use this language. The Allied and Health and everybody else, they talk about CPD points, but we don't talk about CPD points. We talk about your learning areas that you've learned and your reflection and all that, which will cover your learning areas. We don't need you to upload anything. We don't need you to, talk about points as well. We don't use that system. We don't have a third-party entries. So what do we mean by that? I cannot share my login details with any other person to log on my behalf and submit on my behalf. We need to respect I need to respect my profile, because a lot of things can be done to my profile if I share my login details, and also protecting my personal information. We talk about POPI. So no non-practicing pharmacist in the pharmacy that's out there. If you are not practicing, of course, if an inspector then walks in, inspection officer, and then finds in a pharmacy, that will also constitute a disciplinary sort of process or procedure that will be instituted against you. We also encourage lifelong learning. So in all these things, these are highlights. We encourage lifelong learning, and that is why we talk about the CPDs. So we also have this registration app, right? I have it on my phone. I know it's compatible with every other phone, whether it's an iOS or Android. I've got it on an iOS, I've got it on Android, so it's very compatible, very user friendly, and you're able to, on that particular registration app, have your digital registration card. I can just show my card. If an inspection officer asks me to show my card, I'll do that. It will also show you whether you're practicing and you're active for that particular year. You're able to upload and change your picture as well. I've done that on the app, and you're also able to amend personal details. And also, it's got the CPD system as well. At the comfort of your own home, you can do that. While you're just relaxing on your couch, you can just put in a CPD entry. Just one. That's how very user-friendly it is. So, colleagues, that will be all in terms of our presentation, of course, what we covered, and then I will open and for questions at this particular stage. Thank you so much. Can I check if we've got questions, colleagues, on the platform? Okay. Um, in terms of addressing that shortfall, we are as the office. We have prepared a communication, and we've also identified the sort of the challenges in terms of the pharmacists that were not supposed to, that received the letters in error, because like I said from my presentation, there were pharmacists that CPDs were archived for 2022. So we have identified those, and we, as the office, we are in the process of rectifying that. So if you've received a notification that you are not competent and you know you are, you can write to us at pharmacistcpd@sapc.za.org, because from what we have also received in terms of our colleagues, we have been in communication with them to assure them that we have received their CPD submission for 2022. However, it was also archived, and that did not count as if they were compliant. But we are addressing that particular challenge. The office is well aware of it, and we implore colleagues to sort of be patient until we sort that out, because we are really addressing that matter. Yeah.
The next question from Yuchi. How do we address a shortfall in the CPDs for 2022 and now have received a notice of non-practicing?
Okay, we are going to we are after all the investigation is done, we're going to issue a communication to the colleagues that are affected, and because for now we have not designated any person as non-practicing as yet, right? We have issued that particular communication, but there's no pharmacist that from the list or from the
if you're still studying.
Sorry. Okay. All right. Is there any other question?